Hello, my dear students. Today I'll deliver a lecture on the topic, especially on Antonio Gramsci. Uh, this is a topic that is in your paper number one, that is political theory. And as my assignment, as a part of my assignment, uh, as a part of my responsibility uh, to discuss this particular unit with you. uh, so in that context, I'd like to deliver a video lecture on Antonio Gramsci's concept of state, his concept of hegemony, his concept of civil society, his concept of ideological state apparatus. But it may not be possible to sum up all those ideas of Antonio Gramsci within a single lecture. But I'll try my level best to make some sense with my deliberation so that you can, understand uh, a little bit about Antonio Gramsci's different ideas, especially hegemony, state, and civil society. This Antonio Gramsci is considered to be a kind of, a neo-Marxist. He's considered to be a neo-Marxist. His well-known book that we all know, that is Prison Notebooks. He basically reformulated the Marxist ideas, and he tried to broaden the Marxian perspective by making some sort of, you know, uh, post-Marxian analysis in that particular Prison Notebooks. And as a whole, this Gramsci's analysis on this, Marxian philosophy is considered to be the new Marxist analysis. So the very first idea, which basically related to Antonio Gramsci, is considered to be hegemony. And while we are talking about hegemony, we have different ideas, but from this Gramsci's viewpoint, I'd like to analyze the concept of hegemony from theoretical perspective. So from Gramscian viewpoint, the very idea of hegemony is considered to be a kind of ideological indoctrination of common sense value. That means an ideological indoctrination of bourgeois culture, which is considered by the common people as a common sense value. So on the basis of that analysis, and this on that particular theoretical assumption, Antonio Gramsci tries to analyze how the entrance capitalist forces, with the help of some sort of other arrangement, with the help of some sort of political society, with the help of civil society, how this entrance capitalist forces under the garb of the state mechanism continues to be remain dominant. But unlike this Marxian perspective is basically talking about class perspective, but in case of Antonio Gramsci's perspective, the class analysis is something different in comparison to Marxian analysis of class perspective. So regarding Gramsci's hegemony, it is considered to be a process. It is a process in civil society whereby a fraction of the dominant class exercises control through its moral and intellectual leadership over the dominated class. That means, in nowadays, in a post-Marxian analysis, in the societal context, the very idea of civil society is very much prevalent, which has been considered as, from Hegelian perspective, is considered as a, pre-political society, and Marx also analyzes in that way. But from Gramscian viewpoint, the civil society plays a very significant role in terms of maintaining hegemony, along with making some sort of consensus with the state mechanisms. And state continues to be remain a kind of coercive force. Then secondly, it's a kind of relationship between the dominant and the dominated class. The hegemony involves the successful attempts of the dominant class to use its political, moral, and intellectual leadership to establish its view of the world as all inclusive and universal, and to shape the interests and needs of the subordinate groups. So that is one particular analysis of Gramscian hegemony. But more specifically, I'd like to tell you that how this Gramscian version of hegemony does imply. It's basically analyzed in terms of two society. That is, one is political society, another one is civil society. And according to Gramsci, the state mechanism, with the help of, by making consensus with these two, political and civil society, they make some sort of, consensus, and they continues to be remain dominant. Firstly, say for example, this political society. Whenever we're talking in political society, it's basically talking about the police, the domination, the coercion. And whenever we're talking about civil society, that means the consent, that means the corporations. So on the basis of this you know on the basis of this relationship in political society and civil society, by making consensus with these two forces, the state as a dominant entity continues to be remain dominant. From political society's perspective, we have these police forces, we have this defense mechanism, we have this coercive powerful entity. And from civil society perspective, the civil society always tries to gain the consent of the common people. The civil society always try to develop that particular idea, which I have already told you, that is ideological indoctrination of bourgeois culture. They tries to legitimize this ideological indoctrination of bourgeois culture and make people to believe that it's a kind of common sense values for all. That means this civil society, by making consensus with the political society, by making some sort of consensus with the state mechanism, they always try, to, gain the confidence of the common people that they cannot go alone. They cannot survive of their own. They need some sort of, leadership. So on the basis of that intellectual leadership characters that prevail within that particular subconscious group, within that particular civil society groups, by making some sort of consensus, the state mechanism continues to be remain dominant, and in that way, this hegemony continues to be relevant. And in this this Gramscian perspective, the very idea of hegemony is not at all related with this economic dominance. Likewise, this Marxian perspective is basically his analysis based on this economic class perspective. But from Gramscian perspective also is talking about this class perspective, but his idea of class perspective is something different in comparison to Marxian analysis of this economic class perspective. Then again, in case of state, we can have some ideas in terms of Marxist-Leninist conception of state, where state are considered to be a coercive instrument of the bourgeois. It always the bourgeois considered the state as a coercive instrument, and accordingly they try to pursue it. But for Gramsci, the state is at the same time a primary instrument for the expansion of dominant class power, and a coercive force, that is political society, that keeps subordinate groups weak and disorganized. That means from Gramscian viewpoint, the state on the one hand, it's considered to be a kind of primary instrument. It is not it is not a single instrument. It is one of the primary instrument for expansion of dominant class power and coercive force. That means with the help of that political society that keeps subordinate groups weak and disorganized. That means in Gramscian analysis, the class perspectives remain prevalent. But here, the state mechanism maintain their dominance not only with the help of the entire state apparatus, but with the help of this particular dominant coercive force, that is political society. and they continuously pressurize the other group to become subordinate to them. Then again, in prison notebook, there are two analyses I have already mentioned. That is, the opposition is between state and civil society. That means hegemony pertains to the civil society, and coercion, that is to the state. That means there's a kind of you know there's a kind of two-way traffic. There's a kind of reciprocal relationship between state and civil society. If state offers some sort of positive attitude, if state ready to offer help to civil society also ready to offer help to the state. That means by making consensus in between the state and civil society, by making that particular mutual consensus among the state and civil society, they continues to be they try to enforce that particular ideological indoctrination of bourgeois culture, not necessarily from economic class perspective, but it's a kind of common sense values for the common people that we cannot proceed of our own. So in that context, from hegemonic perspective, we are talking about that this direction that pertains to the civil society, and coercion, the domination to the state. That means domination provided by the state, and directions that pertains to the civil society. So there's a kind of nexus between that state and civil society. So according to this Gramsci, the state is the entire complex of practical and theoretical activities with which the ruling class not only justifies and maintains the domination, but manages to win the active consent of those whom it rules. So here, this consent is very much important. So in Gramscian analysis of state, is considered to be a complex of practical and theoretical activities with which the ruling class not only justifies and maintains the dominations, but at the same time it continues to win the active consent of those whom it rules. That means there's a kind of acceptability on the part of the masses to accept the dominations of the ruling class, and in that way hegemony continues to be relevant. So there are some brief summaries on this, the concept of hegemony and this, so the relationship between state and hegemony. So number one, hegemony is not a pool of consent in contrast to another of coercion, but as a synthesis of consent and coercion. So it's a kind of this hegemony is considered to be a kind of it's a kind of synthesis. Likewise, this Marxian analysis we already know. You all know about this. Thesis, antithesis, and synthesis. There's a kind of mechanism how to synthesize the things. So here as well, there's a kind of synthesis of this consent and coercions. It's not a pole of consent in contrast to another coercion, but it's a synthesis of consent and coercion. So it's a kind of conglomeration. It's a kind of mutual, acceptability from both the sides. And hegemony is no longer confined to civil society, but is also located in the state as a political hegemony, contrasted to the civil hegemony. So here, there's some sort of that civil society also enjoys some amount of prestige, status. So the civil society, with the help of the civil hegemony, they maintain that particular status quo parallelly with the political society on the basis of political hegemony. So it's a kind of parallel development. It's a kind of reciprocal relationship between this hegemony and in case of hegemony, there's a kind of parallel responsibilities from both state perspective as well as the civil societies. Secondly, hegemony is everywhere, but in different forms. The state becomes an apparatus of hegemony. State is considered to be a kind of apparatus of hegemony. That means it's encompassing civil society and only distinguished from it by the coercive apparatus pertaining only to the state. So so that is one kind of summaries in case of the relationship between the state and civil society. Hegemony may be everywhere, but it's different form, and state is only one of the apparatus of hegemony. That means it continues to be a kind of carriers. State is considered to be carrier on the basis of which hegemony continues to be remain relevant, on the basis of which this ruling class continues to be remain more dominant by making that particular mutual consensus between that particular state mechanism and the civil society with the idea of political and civil society. Then again, state and civil society are identical. Thus, consent and coercion become coextensive with the state, and hegemony is inseparable from the state apparatuses themselves. So, in that way, hegemony continues to be relevant. But hegemony is something different in comparison to the power. So, this Gramscian analysis of this hegemony is something, it's a kind of extension of Marxian version of this class perspective. It's a kind of broader perspective. It tries to broader the Marxian perspective by putting emphasis upon this very idea of hegemony, and how with the help of this hegemonic behavior state continues to be remain dominant. But the whole analysis is not based on this economic class analysis as this Marxian analysis made. Then fourthly, this Gramsci viewed the state as an extension of the hegemonic apparatus, as a part of the system developed by the bourgeois to perpetuate and expand their control of society in the context of class struggle. So these are some sort of analogy that made by this Antonio Gramsci in terms of this relationship between this state and civil society in analyzing the concept of hegemony. Then again move towards the relationship between state and civil society. State and civil society both work for the capitalist class. The capitalist class at first captured the mode of production, and then the state, and after capturing all the institutions, it will capture the civil society. Civil society is created to hide the exploitation of the capitalist class done through the capitalist state. The capitalists use civil society institution in order to create hegemonic control over all classes of society. So it is nothing but this very idea of hegemony that expressed by this Antonio Gramsci in his own analysis of this Gramscian perspective of hegemony. Is basically tries to explain the capitalist characters, how the capitalist state with only with the help of entrenched capitalist forces continues to be remain dominant and continuously exploited the huge masses even in the changing circumstances. Because this is extension of Marxian class perspective. So how not only with the help of this economic class perspective, how from other perspective, how the state can able to continues to be more dominant, and some of the characters of the state remain invisible in character. They try to hide something because there's a kind of impression that created by the civil society in favor of the state, that the common people must follow the rules and regulations provided by the state, and that is common sense values, and that developed by the civil society groups with the help of the consent of the common people. That's why it is the ideological indoctrination of bourgeois culture. According to Gramsci, the institutions of civil society like family, school, and church familiarize the citizens with the rules of behavior and teach them to show respect to the authority of the ruling class. Then again, if we're talking about the naturalist view, we saw the civil society as the reign of order over a state of nature in which men found themselves in some pre-state society. So from naturalist viewpoint, the very idea of civil society is something different. Civil society meant an organization of individual beyond the family, production, etc. into a collective entity governed by laws. Men voluntarily entered these collective organizations. So there's a kind of voluntary engagement on the part of the man in that particular civil society groups. And in that way, willingly or unwillingly, that this through this civil society, that collective acceptability inherently become more deeper in that particular state relationship, the relationship between state and civil society. and on the basis of which, by making that kind of consensus, that hegemony continues to prevail. Then again, if we talking about the Hegel perspective, the Hegel's very idea of civil society, he regards civil society as a pre-political society, that which the naturalists have named state of nature. According to natural viewpoint, civil society is considered to be a state of nature. From Hegelian perspective, is considered to be a pre-political society. So, from Hegel's perspective, the civil society was the reign of dissoluteness, misery, and physical and ethical corruption, just the opposite of the naturalist conception. So, these are some sort of debate in terms of analyzing the very idea of civil society that has been, re-emphasized by, Gramsci in his own analysis while talking about, when analyzing the market. Gramsci describes ideology as a terrain of the practices, principles, and dogmas having a material and institutional nature, constituting individual subjects once these were inserted into such a terrain. Then again, regarding this ideological state apparatus, that means all ideological and political superstructure, including the family, trade union, reformist political parties, and private media, are by definition state apparatuses, or to put in another way, are hegemonic apparatus. So Gramscian version of this ideological state apparatus is nothing but some sort of mechanisms with the help of which it's become hegemonic in character. These are some sort of apparatus which help in extending, the hegemonic characters. It's a kind of, enlargement of that particular, hegemonic behaviors. So that the incorporation of the state into dominant class hegemony emerged, and according to him, from the nature of bourgeois class itself, from the fact that the state had constituted itself as an organism of continuous movement, capable of absorbing and culturally transforming the entire society. So this is something. So this, Gramsci's main contribution to the post-Marxian phases is basically to broaden the Marxian perspective. He basically modified and reinterpreted the notion of class domination, that the state was not simply an instrument for one class to use in coercion to another. In modern democracies, Gramsci contended that class domination had considerable limitations. Then again, this Gramsci is talking about any domination which did exist was far more complex than previously understood. Bourgeois hegemony elicited consent from the masses. Open coercion was not necessarily an overt feature. Then, again, this Gramsci is talking about the state was an arena for intellectual ideas and debate. It possessed a certain relative autonomy and was not simply an epiphenomenon. It could act in economy, and through the medium of ideas, it could persuade the masses to support it. And this is also talking about, according to this Gramsci, this revolution did not mean outright confrontations, but rather intellectual maneuver. The bourgeois hegemony had to be intellectually challenged by proletarian hegemony. So, in this sense, Marxism became the part of hegemonic aspirations of the, the proletariat. So, this Gramsci had a distinctive idea of the civil society, which is clearly different from Marxian uses of the terms. But from Gramsci's perspective, civil society did not refer to economic relationship simply, but rather to the superstructure. There's, the ensemble of organism commonly called the private, which corresponds to the functions of the hegemony which the dominant group exercises throughout the society. And in Gramsci's notion of state, the civil society that constitutes an important element. because this Gramscian notion of state, that it's basically talking about the political society plus the civil society. So the hegemony that protected by that particular the coercions. So the civil society state are one, and the other it's same. So the state here seems to be represent that particular that particular synthesis of that consent and that particular coercions. So these are some sort of basic ideas about this Gramsci's notions of hegemony, then his idea of state, this civil society. Uh, but this Gramsci is basically best known for his idea of this hegemony, because according to him, ideas and ideology plays a crucial role in determination, you know, uh, in determination of this economic structure. And the bourgeois society is not only simply controlled by open force, but it's made of operation is through consent. So hegemony represents a subtle form of cultural domination. So from a different perspective, in different way, this hegemony continues to be remain dominant. The main, the very idea of this Gramscian analysis basically revolving around his ideas how this entrance capitalist forces, even in the changing circumstances, uh, they continues to be relevant. The answer is that hegemony, by making some sort of consensus with this political and civil society, with the help of this coercion and consent, and where the civil society plays a very significant role. So these are some sort of basic ideas, and I want to make some sort of minimum informations about the very idea of Gramscian analysis of class perspective, his very idea of this hegemony. But I don't think that this is enough for you. So try to go through more literature reviews. I'll also offer some sort of literature by tomorrow. uh, so hope you'll go through the videos and try to understand on this Gramscian analysis. So stay safe and stay home. Thank you.